The bank was buzzing that Friday morning, printers humming, shoes squeaking against the marble floor, and the low murmur of customers waiting for their turn. It was business as usual, until a quiet figure stepped through the glass doors and everything, slowly but surely, began to change. Daniel Reed wasn't the kind of man who demanded attention. His jacket was plain, his shoes slightly worn, his face calm and unassuming. To most, he looked like another working man, maybe cashing a paycheck or paying a bill. But what no one saw, what no one expected, was that in the inside pocket of that old jacket sat a folded check that could shake the room before him. He walked straight to the counter, patient and polite. The teller, a young woman named Clara, greeted him with a rehearsed smile. But when Daniel slid the check across the counter, her smile faltered. Her hands froze halfway through the motion. She blinked once, twice, then looked up at him, confusion in her eyes. "Sir. I'll need my manager," she whispered. Within seconds, the click of sharp heels echoed across the room. Margaret Hensley, the branch manager, appeared, dressed in a sleek navy suit, her expression the kind of arrogance that came from too many years of unchecked authority. She didn't even look at Daniel when she spoke. "What seems to be the problem here?" Clara hesitated, leaned in, and whispered something to her manager, sliding the check across. Margaret's brow arched as she glanced down, and then she laughed. A cold, dismissive laugh that filled the lobby and turned heads. "You're joking," she said, loud enough for others to hear. "You expect me to believe this? A 7-figure check? You must be out of your mind." Daniel's voice was steady, calm. "No joke, ma'am. It's real. I'd just like to deposit it." Her laughter grew louder. "Sir, I've seen a lot of scams in my time, but this one might be the most creative. Tell you what, why don't we call the police? They love stories like this." Gasps rippled through the line. A few customers exchanged uneasy glances. Daniel didn't move. He didn't argue. He simply said, "All I ask is that you verify it. You'll see." Margaret rolled her eyes dramatically. "Fine. Let's end this little game." She snapped at the teller. "Run it through." Clara's hands trembled as she entered the information. The screen beeped. She blinked, confused. Then again. And again. Each time, the result was the same: verified, authentic, legitimate. The check was real. Clara's face went pale. "Ma'am, it's valid." Margaret snatched the slip from her hand, disbelief twisting her features. "That's impossible." "Run it again." 3 more times. Same result. The money was real, traceable, clean, and far beyond anything she'd ever handled in her branch. The room was silent now. The mockery was gone. Margaret's face flushed crimson as she glared at Daniel. "Where would you get this kind of money?" she demanded, her tone dripping venom. "It doesn't make sense." Daniel's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. "It doesn't have to make sense to you, ma'am. What matters is, it's mine." Her voice dropped to a whisper, sharp enough to cut. "You people don't belong here with this kind of money." The words hung in the air like poison. A gasp escaped from somewhere in the crowd. One man muttered, "Did she really just say that?" Another woman folded her arms, glaring. The tide had turned, and Margaret didn't even see it coming. Then Daniel's phone buzzed. He checked it briefly, his calm never breaking. He looked back at her. "You know, ma'am, I didn't come here just to make a deposit. I came to observe how this branch treats its customers. All of them." Margaret frowned. "What are you talking about?" Daniel's voice grew firm. "For the last 3 months, I've been negotiating acquisitions across this state, including this bank. By Monday, the deal closes." He stepped closer, his quiet authority filling the room. "So no, ma'am. I won't just be your customer. I'll be your boss." The silence that followed was absolute. Every head turned. Every breath seemed to pause. Then came the wave, gasps, whispers, disbelief. Margaret's face drained of color. You're lying," she stammered. Daniel nodded toward the teller. "You can check the public records if you'd like. It's all there." For the first time, Margaret was speechless. The same woman who mocked him, threatened him, humiliated him, now stood frozen, powerless. Daniel leaned in slightly. His tone was calm, not vengeful, but heavy with truth. "Let this be your lesson. Never judge someone by how they look. You don't know their story, or how far they've come to stand where they are." Applause broke through the silence, small at first, then growing. Some customers clapped, others murmured agreement. Even the teller smiled through her shock. Margaret, red-faced and shaking, could only watch as Daniel turned to leave, dignity intact, justice delivered. But just as he reached the door, his phone buzzed again. He read the message, and his expression darkened. "Congratulations on the purchase. But you've stepped into something dangerous. They won't let you keep it." Daniel's eyes narrowed. The room around him faded into the background. The real fight, it seemed, hadn't even begun. The weekend after the scene at the bank felt longer than any Daniel Reed had ever known. The story had spread like wildfire, whispers in business circles, social media buzz, and even a few quiet congratulatory calls from people who had once ignored him. Everyone wanted to know more about the man who had walked into a branch, humiliated by a manager, only to reveal he owned the very walls she stood in. But behind the attention and applause, Daniel knew something was off. The message he'd received that day, "They won't let you keep it," wasn't just idle talk. It came from an old friend in corporate law, someone who'd seen deals like this turn dark fast. On Monday morning, Daniel returned to the branch, this time in a tailored navy suit. Not to impress, but to make one thing clear, he belonged. Cameras flashed outside. Reporters shouted questions. But Daniel kept walking, expression calm, posture steady. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The same employees who once whispered behind his back now stood straighter, their greetings polite, their tones respectful. Clara, the teller who had defended him, smiled nervously. But Margaret, the manager who mocked him, was nowhere to be seen. Daniel entered the conference room, where 3 board members of the regional bank sat waiting. Their expressions were tight, forced smiles masking frustration. The oldest of them, Mr. Carlyle, spoke first. "Mr. Reed," he said with a thin smile, "congratulations on finalizing the acquisition. Though, I'll admit, this sudden interest in our institution caught us by surprise." Daniel met his gaze evenly. "Surprise wasn't my goal, Mr. Carlyle. Change was." The man's smile faltered. "Change can be costly." The room went silent. Daniel knew what he meant. The subtext was clear: "You're not welcome here." Another board member, a woman in a gray suit, cleared her throat. "We've reviewed the merger documents, but there seems to be some confusion with the corporate filings. A few inconsistencies that could, unfortunately, delay the transition." Daniel raised a brow. "Inconsistencies?" He slid a folder across the table. "Already reviewed and cleared by the Federal Oversight Committee. Everything's in order." The woman hesitated. Carlyle's jaw tightened. The trap had failed. Moments later, the door opened, and in walked Margaret. Her once polished confidence was gone, replaced with forced composure. She avoided Daniel's eyes as Carlyle gestured toward her. "Margaret will continue as interim branch manager until the transition period is finalized." Daniel's voice was calm, but firm. "No, she won't." The room froze. He turned to her, eyes steady. "I believe in second chances. But not when someone weaponizes prejudice behind a title." "Miss Hensley, your conduct last Friday wasn't just unethical, it violated federal anti-discrimination policy. You're relieved of duty, effective immediately." Margaret's lips trembled. "You can't." He cut her off softly. "I just did." The silence that followed was thick. Even Carlyle couldn't argue. Daniel stood, buttoning his jacket. "I didn't buy this bank to make enemies. I bought it to make it better. Every person who walks through those doors, regardless of color, class, or background, deserves respect. That's the culture now. Get used to it." He turned to leave, but as he reached the doorway, a sudden crash echoed from outside the meeting room, the sound of shattering glass. Clara rushed in, eyes wide. "Sir, there's someone outside," they threw a rock through the window. "There's a note." Daniel took the note, his heart heavy as he unfolded it. The handwriting was jagged, angry. "You think you can buy your way into our world? You'll regret this." The board members looked pale. Margaret stumbled back in shock. Daniel read it twice, then quietly folded it into his pocket. "I was warned this wouldn't be easy," he said quietly, his gaze hardening. "But justice never is." That afternoon, as he left the building, the same reporters surrounded him. Cameras flashed. Microphones pushed forward. "Mr. Reed, any comment on the threats?" one asked. "Do you regret buying the bank?" another shouted. Daniel paused at the steps, looking out at the crowd. "No," he said. "I don't regret exposing what needed to be exposed. And I don't regret standing where so many were told they didn't belong. This isn't just about one man's check, it's about every door that's ever been closed because someone didn't look the part." The crowd went quiet. Cameras clicked. He smiled faintly, lifting his chin toward the glass doors behind him, the ones that had once symbolized exclusion, now carrying his name on the ownership plaque. "Let them break a window," he said. "I'm here to rebuild the whole building." As Daniel walked away, his phone buzzed again. This time, there was no warning, just a chilling photo. A black SUV parked outside his house. The message beneath it read, "You should have walked away while you could." Daniel's steps slowed. The victory, the justice, the power, it all hung in the air, but so did something darker. He slipped the phone back into his pocket, his jaw setting firm. The man who walked into a bank to deposit a check now faced a new kind of battle, one far beyond money, one that would test everything he stood for. And as he looked toward the horizon, the words came back to him, steady, calm, and resolute. "You don't know what battles someone's fought to stand where they are." This time, he wasn't just standing. He was ready to fight.